Good day to all of you and welcome to this Kaito Webinar about the topic that has been on the table for years now. So the topic for today is Datavault shouldn't slow you down and how to remove roadblocks from the actual data modeling process. My name is Saku and I'm your host for today. Today we have three great presenters and panelists joining us. First of all, Ari Hovi, known author and consultant, having 30 plus years of experience in data modeling, and I would say a huge footprint on educating major part of the Finnish consultants working around data modeling. We also have Petr Beles, CEO of a company behind the Datavault Builder tool. He also has extensive experience in consulting in Datavault, 10 plus years. And we also have Jonni Henttinen, a partner and principal consultant at Kaito, having multiple years of experience in consulting major Finnish companies in data warehousing and analytics. About the agenda for today, so after me, Jonni will go some principles of Datavault modeling through, and after Jonni, there will be Petr Beles on stage, basically going through about Datavault Builder and also doing some demoing. After that, we will still have time for panel discussion and Ari Hovi will join us. About some housekeeping practicalities, so please be active, ask questions. You can use the Livestorm chat functionality to post the questions and we will take those questions during the panel discussion. Further said, I will hand over to Jonni. Please welcome.
Yeah, so hi everybody, and very nice that I'm again able to present here, and very hopefully nice to see you all. I understood that there's multiple people on the line already, and I will give you a maximum 10 minutes speak about the driving principles behind the Datavault modeling methodology. The idea here is that I won't go too much into the details, but I would give you an idea that what are the main principles that you have to keep in mind if you want to succeed with Datavault modeling, and of course in overall in data warehousing projects that you will have. And my name is, as again said, I'm still Jonni Henttinen. I'm one of the principal consultants. I work currently in the cloud data warehousing section, and I usually work in the role of an architect in these projects and advisor. So I help our clients to understand what kind of modeling methodologies, what kind of technologies they should use there to actually make things happen. And basically, why we are today here, we are here today to talk about Datavault and why Datavault in overall. That's a discussion that has been going on the data scene for quite a while. And there are a couple of points that I want to raise here, why Datavault is such an important thing to have as part of your data warehousing activities as a model methodology. First of all, it's one of the first like modeling methodologies that have been built ground up from the point that it should be agile. So it means that you can start small and then expand as you go along. And of course, that shouldn't be the only thing that really matters to you. There's also multiple different things, like you get historical like audit type of information as part of the Datavault modeling. And when you have multiple different heterogeneous systems in your landscape, the Datavault modeling enables you to quite easily combine the different data sets coming from different systems so that you identify the main business concepts and then link the different data coming from the different systems to the Datavault models as hubs, links, and satellites. And one maybe major thing here is that if the Datavault implementation is done properly, there shouldn't be any need for major redesigns. So once you start, you can start small, You can start enhancing your model, adding new stuff on top of that. And if you have started your whole experience with Datavault in a correct way, it also means that you shouldn't have to do any major redesigns afterwards. And if I want to talk about this second topic, which is the automation topic, is that when you consider to start a data warehousing project or some kind of a data lake project or lake house project, and you are figuring out what kind of a modeling methodology you want to use there, and if you decide to go with Datavault, one of the things that you have to first keep in mind is that Datavault, when an artisan would do it by hand, it would take quite a lot of time. And it means that if you really want to succeed with Datavault, you really should automate all of the workflow related to the actual Datavault, the raw Datavault building phase of the project, and then also on the business data mart or Kimball type of dimensional model that happens on top of that. Also, when you are creating automation on top of Datavault, it means that you enable the team to work in a standardized way, so that you shouldn't be able to differentiate that which part of the Datavault has been built by which of the developers. And as such, it will also make sure that the good practices that have been set up before the project or the continuous development of the Datavault model starts, those good practices are enforced by the tools that you're currently using. In all ways, it means that if and when you go for Datavault, use an automation tool there, because it's going to get you going faster, so you don't have to start manually figuring out that do I create some Python scripts or do I create everything manually. Choose a product that supports the workflow and makes things faster. The second principle that I want to talk about is that you have to have proper principles, especially relating to how you work with Datavault and how do you actually model your Datavault in practice. There's a lot of discussion in different discussion forums about whether you should go with like a very strict Datavault 2.0 type of approach, or do you want to take some kind of a Hans Holtgren type of a way where you can model transactions as hubs instead of using links and stuff like that. Whatever that discussion is, that when you choose your flavor, stick to it, and don't start like hesitating your approach. And of course, this means that you really have to beforehand know that you have a capable team of doing that actual work there. The second thing, when you have those principles, is that I would say from project experience, a very important thing is that once you encounter a modeling thing that you need to figure out and sort out, solve it once and use that principle always. So don't come up with the same don't come up with a solution to the same problem multiple times during the project. And of course, basically what enables, if we talk about the first part, that okay, this is more about automation, and then that you are able to build the Datavault model in a piece by piece fashion that you can start gradually building up. Of course, that means that you have to be able to commit to working in an agile fashion. So basically, you can start whichever corner of your business and start modeling that thing, and then doing a practical technical implementation of that. And the business should also be involved in the process and make sure that they actually see the results quite early on, and not so that it happens like 6 months after the project has started, because it might be so that the requirements are already old at that point. And maybe the last point or principle, I would say, is that make the modeling visible and involve the business people as early on as possible. It means multiple things, but the collaboration with the business, it should be so that there shouldn't be a line between the guys who do the Datavault modeling and the data warehouse implementation. They should be the same team, which means that there should be a committed product owner who can really spend his or her time participating in the daily life of the project. And the business stakeholders who actually carry the business requirements, they should be willing to spend quite a big amount of their daily work life in the project. And the second thing, when you actually have identified your product owners or new people and stakeholders who are going to be participating in the project, make sure that they are involved in building the Datavault model and part of the modeling process. Datavault Datavault modeling from the first point of view, it's not just a technical exercise. There's a lot of technical things behind there, but the main thing here is that you really should involve the business early on and make the business guys own the Datavault model, all of the conceptual models and the actual Datavault model that's behind there. Because one thing is that Datavault should the Datavault model that is built for your company, it means that it should really depict the business. What are the entities and things in your business? It's not about technical source systems or things like that. And of course, with the correct tooling, you can make it so that the actual modeling of the modeling can be made so that it's really collaborative. And hopefully, we will also see that today. Basically, because there are tools in the market that make it so that there's something happening under the hood, but you don't know what's really happening there. And then there's tools that make it really visible. And maybe the last point here is that, of course, with all of the data initiatives that you are doing in your organization, you have to really deliver early. So you bring business value to your people, and you have to do that very often. So deliver early, deliver often, and you have a great recipe for success. I will be stopping myself here. I will let the stage. I will give the stage to Petr. So I'll thank you all, and we'll hear in the panel discussion in 30 minutes or so. Thanks all.
Thank you, Jonni, and welcome, Petr.
Thank you for having me here, and I will do a short introduction on myself. My name is Petr Beles. I'm working in the data warehousing area since the year 2000. I started with more classical Inman design in finance here in Switzerland. I changed over to Kimball style data modeling in telecommunications. So I know a little bit about the challenges we had with the classical approaches, especially when agility came up. We figured out that it doesn't work out with classical approaches, because Inman was very, very great if we had a plan for months and we could follow it. So it was working out, but as soon as we needed to change fast and later on in the process, it was very difficult. With the Kimball style designs, we had issues as soon as we had 2 or 3 data sources integrated, which worked very, very fine. As soon as the fourth came, it became more and more expensive, and that's why we came up that Datavault is probably the right way for modeling for us. But we heard it needs to go along with the right tooling, because we're creating a lot of technical objects in Datavault modeling. So I will a little bit highlight here in my presentation how we address this, what Datavault Builder is, and how it could look like for you when you're working with the tool. So let me share my screen. And let's switch to the presentation. So what is the Datavault Builder? It's a model-driven data warehouse automation tool. And one of our main aspects is to bringing business users and IT together, because we believe that a good data warehouse solution is created based on business requirements. So bringing in the knowledge of the business users into this process is really very, very crucial. But also, we have seen perfectly created solutions in the data warehousing area, but if the business users were not involved, they couldn't understand what the solution was about. It was not accepted. It wasn't used. There were a lot of workaround solutions. And one of the main aspects as well to bring the business users in is to reduce the time to market. So how long does it take when we get a new requirement to deliver it to the internal data consumers? It's about agility. We heard it. It's bringing the requirements to the end user now, because I had this project when I was talking about where I started in data warehousing in the first banking project. It took us 2 years to deliver the first drop of the solution. By then, the business requirements changed considerably. So big parts of what we have created never were used. And this is what we want to omit. So this is what the Datavault Builder is about the agile tool, collaboration between different groups in the company, and bringing value early on so it can be used. So is the Datavault Builder a good tool? And Spark made the research and compared us to different other providers of such kind of software, from Oracle, from Informatica, and they came up that they see us top in the category of time to market. And we're very proud on that, because that's really where we put in our efforts, and we try to make it in every version a little bit better. And what we have here as well is the product satisfaction was the highest and as well price to value. And that is because the Datavault Builder is covering a lot of functionalities that you would use usually many other different tools to bring the stuff together. So as we have not much time, I shorten it here to a different perspective. So what is the Datavault Builder doing? It is about data integration. It is about data historization. So it goes to the source systems. You connect whatever sources you need. It brings the data into your vault and stores it in a way that it's auditable, that it's reproducible, that it's historized. And now the people come and say, but we heard about this data vault thing. This is very complicated and it's creating a lot of technical tables. And that's correct, but you don't need to worry because the data consumers, they have their own interfaces, and the interfaces we keep stable and in a way as they're required by the business users. So it could be that you create here a dimensional model. It is the 80% use case probably when used with our tool, and I will explain what different other options are, but still you can visually select which kind of attributes, entities you want to mix, how to denormalize up to which level. So your consumers will not notice that you're storing the data in a way which is beneficial to become agile, that it's maintainable over time, and which is protecting your investment. For them, it looks the way they need that it looks like. And for you, if you need to manage this kind of backend as well, creating it manually is a job killer. It's probably killing your career because it will not work out. So what we managed here is to create abstraction layer. So you're working here on a logical data model, and from the logical data model, the automation part is creating the technical implementation right away. And this is what we will see now in the live demonstration. For a little bit more technical people, just what we will see now in the live demonstration is we will go from the source system into our staging area, into our vault, and then we can create whatever interfaces there are. Because today we get sometimes requests to create third normal form interfaces, which is perfectly fine. For that, you don't need to store the data this way in the core. Or we have maybe in data science a lot of requests of creating flat tables. So outputting that as well is possible, and that's possible because we are here more normalized than all of this kind of interfaces required. So when we now go through the demo, you will see all these different steps in its own modules, and we will try to go even down to the data mart and into a report, because agility is about creating tangible output. So if the business user don't see the data, you are not finished. So let's switch over to the tool itself. And it's a web-based front end. The back end is Docker-based, so it can be deployed in the cloud. It can be deployed on premises. It's really up to you how you run the software, how many instances of the software you run. So it means if you have a development machine, test, and production, or if you have more environments, if you're using sandboxing, it's supporting everything, but that's not something I can show here in the short demonstration. What I will show here is how we collaborate with the business user. And what I already did here in my Datavault Builder instance we are having here is I have loaded a data model. This data model was created in the tool itself in a discussion with the business users. And the industry we're having here is a ground handler at the airport that we really work with. This is based on a real case, just remodeled with general terms and without any confidential information. So what we see here is that the central point of this ground handler at the airport is the flight. So we added here the so-called concept of a flight to our data model. And this is not yet related to Datavault directly. It's just about business. It's about the flight. And we asked them, so if you're servicing flight, what is related to a flight? And they came up with other core business concepts. They have airlines, caterers, passengers, ground handlers like themselves. And we have grouped these core business concepts into different subject areas. Because we have here already clients having several hundreds of core business concepts within their data warehouse, and to be able to understand how this is related, we group them by subject areas. Again, classical data modeling, so nothing to be afraid of. And this kind of visualization we use in real discussions with the business users. So we talked to them about 2.5 hours, and they were adding more terms. Let's imagine that they add here some new concept about maybe cars. They are needing cars to service the flights they have. So we just add it. It takes a few seconds to add it. But what happens in the background is the tool knows exactly how to derive the technical implementation of the data model. So already this object we have seen here added right now in real time, and I'm switching now to the database view, not because you have to, just to understand how the tool works, is in the database directly, an object was created for these cars to be held, and it's linked directly in real time and bidirectional to the data model. So let's update here the metadata. This is what we really created, and we can now here change as well what we want to do. And if we change stuff in the database, it will immediately as well update our data model. And why is that crucial? Because this is why many automation approaches failed in the past, that the implementation and the model were not synced together. And I should click the right element. And if I click the right element, we see as well that the changes that I did to the metadata in the database itself are represented in a model. And by this, we have now a solution that in an agile way, we can just add stuff to the canvas. It's implemented right away. If we change the implementation, it's changing the model, and you don't have lots of problems like in other approaches. So let's assume that we have now created our logical data model, and now we want to implement it and connect it to data. And this is what usually the backroom people do. And I would run through in a very, very short way. So let's go to the staging area. Already there are 2 source connectors configured, and I select the tables I want to load. I will now take some flight information from a publicly available source. And here again, we see it, how it works out. I'm not just defining that there is a load into the staging area. It will create the target table automatic. It will create the load definition automatically, and it will load the data at the same time. And while it's server-based, in the meantime, I can continue working. So just adding like 3 different source tables here to my model is very, very quick. It happens in the background, and I'm skipping a lot of details. Like I could already define here stuff like delta loading, but as we're working agile and we can refine our solutions later without any additional costs, this is something I will do later. So we're just adding the data sources, the data is already loaded. The next step is that within the tool, and that's why it's replacing so many tools, I can already have a look at the data. So let's have a look maybe on this transactional data. Let's look how the data distribution is of different values. And we can visualize this as well with one click. So we already see here that there are different number of airlines in our data set, and the WN looks like the biggest airline here. And this is Southwestern Airlines, which is correct, which is the biggest airline in number of flights in this time of period we are researching here. So this is as well a way how you can communicate with your business user. You can show them if there are any problems with their data, if there is different issues in that they didn't expect it, or if this kind of codes are really what they expect as business code. So the next step is now to connect the model-driven perspective we did in an interactive session with the business user with the data-driven perspective we're getting from the source system. So let's connect it, just add here a load. We're selecting our data source that we just staged. And now the central point, what Datavault is about business keys. So how do we recognize an object in the real world? And what we are doing here, we are asking the business user, if you want to identify a flight in the real world, what you do. So maybe we ask him, if you go to the airport, what are you looking for to catch your flight? And most people answer in this kind of scenario that they look for the flight number they have on their ticket. And most people go on the right day to the airport. You maybe don't do this consign, you don't know maybe actively that this is part of the business key, but you know that you're taking the right date. And now the tool, as it is interactive, working directly in real time with the data on the database, you can ask, is this kind of key unique? And this is central to identify something, that the keys are unique. And we see now that certain key combinations are not, but it's not only showing us that these key combinations are not unique, but how many duplicates we have, and it gives us a sample data set. And this is crucial. If you get this wrong when creating a data vault, it will cost you a lot of time to change this later on to fix this kind of issues. And we have seen this again and again, that business keys usually are not perfectly clean. We see again and again, you have duplicated customer numbers, duplicated order numbers, whatever, or missing order numbers, missing customer numbers. It happens again and again. So if we check this here, it's very, very cheap to fix it because we can do it before it's finally implemented and deployed. So we can add here maybe the unique carrier code, which was not unique, because this is implicating code sharing. And the good thing is, if we show something like this with an example to a business user, he immediately usually understands what the problem is. He gives us feedback, tells us how to fix it. And these are small kind of iterations. This is this agile approach of fixing stuff before we go on, before it becomes a problem. And again, if we click it, there are some more issues. And this kind of problem is related to Southwestern Airlines. And if we look again at the sample data, we will see that here the airport of origin is different for the same flight number on the same flight date. And this is because they're doing round trip flights. And maybe we need to call now Southwestern Airlines to ask about it as we did, but we already, before we go on, know how to fix this kind of issues. Now, the key is good, so we can go on as well. Here I'm skipping a lot of detail settings that we could set, because now the tool knows what to do. It will create the hub load, it will create the satellite, it will create the satellite load. And from this, we have already a production-ready implementation into the vault. And just for repetition of what the different elements are, the data vault is separating the functions of data in its own elements. So the business key is going here into the hub, represented by our core business concept. The attributes describing this key are going here into a so-called satellite. Here all the historization is happening, and what we haven't created here is the relations, which will become link tables. They will keep track of relations of different core business concepts between them. So we have loaded the data, we have created the loads into the core. Right away, as this is production ready, we can start loading the data. And the tool will now go back into the staging layer. It will add the business key and hash key calculations. And this is what we talked before, is this you shouldn't do this manually. This is all deterministic. This can be derived from the data model. So the data is already loaded here. By the data vault standard is defined which kind of columns exist. By strict naming standards, there's described which postfixes are used. And this makes your solution maintainable over time because it protects your investment. Because if in 3 years or in 5 years or in 10 years, and that's the perspective we're having in mind when we're creating this tool, something changes how stuff should be implemented on the technical level, we will deliver you updated patterns and update scripts. And we are showing already now that we are doing this for the last 9 years for Oracle and SQL Server, and as well for Snowflake and Exasol. We are doing this since we are supporting this kind of databases, and we will do this as well for Synapse Analytics that will be supported soon. And we are helping you to protect your investment that you did here in your data model, that you can derive again and again new technical implementations. So as we have loaded the data here into the core, now the hypothetical question, should we call our business user and tell him that we're done, our story is completed? And no, please don't do this if you're working agile. It's about tangible outputs. And tangible output means that we have a proper interface. The business user can connect it and he can create his first report. So let's go on. Let's create the following layers. And why was this missed in earlier solutions? Because it maybe took too long to create interfaces that people were granted access directly into your core data warehouse. So you got stuck, you were not able to refactor anymore. And this is not the case anymore. Here, we can really visually select now from our business model. We can select the level of denormalization, or here I will just select a few columns that I want to output. And I will just randomly grab some that we can then show that this is maybe not the best solution and change it later. And now this layer is in the first version virtual, which means it doesn't need to be reloaded. So it's already done. The data is already here. And this is what I can now output to my business user. So the last thing I need to do is I go to the business rules section. and I just publish this kind of interface, and that's it. Now I went through from staging layer into the core, into my denormalization interface layer, created a business rule, which is not containing any business logic yet, but I can add this later. And in the background, the data lineage was updated. We can maybe filter here a little bit down on the implementation we have done. And what we see here, we have the source system, we have the staging table, we have the core layer with the hub and the satellite that was created in the background. We have created a denormalization layer. There was a business rule added, and now we will add here access here, the access layer in a second. And for that, I'm switching my head and I will go into the reporting tool, because it's really that ready that we can now go into reporting tool. I'm using here ClickView because it's the only tool I know how to operate. We see here an empty tool. I'm showing you now that you can access the metadata from the Datavault Builder and automate as well your reporting layer. So we will now load which kind of interfaces do exist, and the flight one is the one that we created. We can automatically generate the load script here for ClickView, but it would work as well in Tableau, Power BI, SAP Business Objects, Cognos, whatever reporting tool you're using. And now we can create our first report. And the business user will now call back and say, yeah, story one is completed. You delivered the kind of attributes I need, but I missed that I need something for summing, and this kind of column name looks ugly. So that would be like 2 new stories in an agile way of thinking. Let's do that. Let's deliver the updates. So let's go back here to our interface layer. Let's rename the column. The origin city name maybe. Let's store that. And that's it. Because all the layers are synced, we can really call back our business user and tell him you can reload your report. Story 2 is done as well. We have now the origin city name. And now we need some kind of a business rule. So let's add here a new column that he can count. This is the only place where you need to write SQL, because the business rules are written in SQL, but we are doing it in a way that it's versioned automatically, that it can be deployed automatically, and that you can split the rules into very, very small segments. And by the way, if I'm talking, I should as well look what I'm clicking, because I did it on the wrong object. And here I'm adding just my small business rule. But again, I don't need to think about how to bring this kind of new column I just created in this very, very simple SQL code together with my other output. The tool is doing that automatically. I just need to reload my report, and we get our first report. So it automatically has chosen my new column, the flight counter, because it was the only countable. I set the dimension to origin city name, and we now see that ATL is the biggest airport in number of flights, which is business-wise correct. But we see as well that I did a mistake. Instead of outputting the city name, I did output the city code. So that's maybe the last thing. And here now we see the power of Datavault modeling and how simple refactoring becomes. As this is a virtual layer, we can just go here, grab the right column, drop it, and the refactoring is happening automatically in the background. The tool rewrites the SQL queries for you. Again, it takes a few seconds, just reload it, and that's it. And this is already the end of what I wanted to show here. In the background, automatically the data lineage was updated. As well, the operations was completed. So this job is production ready. We can go, we can schedule it using external tools. We have a documentation that was generated. It goes down as well to the column levels here in the staging tables. It goes through all the layers, and it's really current. It's one-to-one synced with the implementation on the database. You can download the PDF, and more important, you can now go and you can now deploy your solution to the next environment by using the deployment module, which is built in. So again, here you use less tools to do such kinds of comparisons, of creating deployment scripts, managing your environments. And the best thing is everything which I showed you here in the live demonstration has its own REST APIs, so you can do everything completely automatic and automate it even further in your process and reach levels like of CI/CD to say, if I create here a new solution, I can deploy it within a few minutes to my test environment, and if it's approved, within a few minutes to production. Good. So I hand over back.
Okay, thanks, Petr, for really practical and simple to follow intro and also demo. And let's go to the actual panel discussion. Please, Petr, stay on stage. And Jonni already arrived on stage again. Welcome back. And then we have Ari Hovi. Please, Ari, could you come on stage as well? And while Ari is joining us, so maybe a quick question to Petr. So how do you see the momentum now currently in the Nordic market when it comes to Datavault technologies?
I think it's picking up. We had other markets developed a little bit earlier, but I would say in the last 1.5 years, really a movement started as well, honestly, with some cloud databases like Snowflake picking up in the market, and anyway, people moving to the cloud. This kind of movement picked up. So we get a lot more requests, and we see as well that there are really good implementations done, and especially, yes, if we are moving to the cloud, we anyway need to change something. It's a good moment to think about your architecture, think about your current pains that you have, and maybe how to address all of them at once when you're moving to a new architecture.
Okay, and now I see that we have also Ari on stage. So welcome, Ari, and maybe if you could quickly introduce yourself.
Oh, hello everybody, and thank you for this opportunity to join in this new webinar. Well, I have a long history, some gray hair already here, so since 80s, and I have seen all these developments starting from non-relational databases to relational databases, and Inmon and Kimball and so on, and so really interesting to see these newest developments now. And of course, I'm a data modeling guy, so I have been doing data modeling since 80s, so I think that's a very good method, and I'm happy to see that it's quite heavily here present in this Petr's presentation, for instance.
Good, thanks, Ari, for the intro, and now going to the actual panel discussion. So maybe we could actually start from those sort of theses or principles that Jonni mentioned before. He talked about automation, he talked about the development principles, and about sort of making the work visible to the business and also onboarding the business people. So Ari, with your background, multiple years on data modeling, so do you see that those principles are the right ones? Would you elaborate a bit? Have those been the ones already back in the past, or are those the ones that we have today, sort of around data modeling and Datavault?
Well, I think those principles were very, very good, and I do agree that Datavault is so complicated. You get so many tables and loadings, ETL processes, and so on. So a tool is certainly almost mandatory these days. And also the principles, yes, keep to your principles. If you try to invent your own ways to use Datavault, so be very careful. I have experiences in that. Those principles, Dan Lindstedt, creator of Datavault and my friend since over 10 years. So I think he's right that don't invent new features there very much, because they have been well thought, these principles he has created, and it sometimes seems a little bit heavy, and you are tempted to do something else, make it a little bit less complicated or so on, but you should be very careful with those kind of things. And of course, if you use a tool like this, so which generates Datavault, so that's not that much of an issue anymore. And of course, this modeling thing, I personally do. I prefer that method, that or way to build data vaults is starting with business modeling, as opposed to the other principle or method to build data vaults, which is more source system based, in which you start with the source system data structure, which might be faster in the beginning because, of course, the source system data models are there. So you just kind of copy them and then change them to data vault. So you might be very fast in these early implementations, but then you miss the business view entirely, which is, in my view, very dangerous. So that I personally think that we should have good data modeling with business users, including higher level business models, so that the business view of the data structures is reflected in the data vault structures, which is not the case if you begin with the source system data structures, which might be really strange and based on, let's say, 20 or 30 years back on some programmers' views of this business area compared with the current business view of the data, which should be reflected then in these data models, conceptual data models.
How about Petr, you, Ari was talking about sort of this way of modeling from the business point of view or starting from the source systems. Obviously, I think there's both on the market right now within the customers. So any practical examples, or how would you approach, for example, a situation where the company has started from modeling from the source systems and there should be a transformation to the other end? So any comments on that? And before you answer, so maybe a quick message to the audience that please, you can still post messages to the chat so we can take those to the panel discussion, but please, Petr.
Ari, I think that that's a very important point that you highlight. And we have this discussion again, because some people come and say, yeah, but this data modeling comes at the cost. We need to think about what our processes is and how they are related and stuff like that. And we try to explain them. First thing is, it comes anyway at a cost, because if you don't do it here, you do it when you're creating every report, because every report creator needs to assume some kind of data model, otherwise he can't create a report. And the second thing is, if you do it source-based, we have proven examples of it that it doesn't work over time, because it works as long as your source system doesn't change maybe, but you can't integrate. And that's one of the great things, and thank you that you mentioned Dan, brought together, that we need to integrate through the business keys between the systems. That's our only link that allows us to bring the data through all the company and get a company-wide view. So we need to focus on what in the business is identifying things, and that these are not the technical keys. And if you then have a migration on your source system, exchanging it against another, all your source system will fall apart anyway. So you need to bring it as early as possible into the business model view. This kind of view is stable, and if it changes for a good reason, because your business changed. But then your technical model will change anyway as well, because you will get all the source systems. So yes, I agree. But it is important to show the value. But I think we can this because now it's interactive and it's really fast. Because before, when we had enterprise data models which took months to create, I understand that people haven't seen the value. But here, within a week or two, we can show them that from their modeling exercise, they get tangible outputs.
Yeah, good point. And I also like to emphasize that the culture of the company or your customer who is now building data warehouses, the culture is really important. Some customers have a more data modeling and data understanding culture inbuilt in the company. Others don't have that much, or maybe they have outsourced. They use a lot of consultants, which is of course good for us consultants, but still you need your own data understanding, modeling understanding, and that means that the best successes in my experience are in those companies where there is education incorporated, so teaching IT people in the company and also business people, teaching these principles, teaching data modeling, teaching, for instance, the SQL language, so that the more that data people who use data every day can also use the SQL language and don't have to use ClickView. Of course, they can use, but if you have a lot of specific data needs which can go, for instance, over across those data marts, you need SQL. SQL is then really handy. So for those experienced data. So I think this culture thing is some really important.
Yeah, and I would maybe say that's like so true because I've been at different clients, and some of the clients are quite happy with the solutions implemented with Datavault. And usually why they are happy is that they have invested in their own people. And if you have seen the previous webinar that I was speaking also about the cultural change, or the how to actually make things happen in an organization, when you start to do these things in a too IT-oriented way. So let's just get a data warehouse up without like bothering the business.
Yeah.
You have the recipe for chaos in there, because most likely the guys who are working in the IT side or behind the scenes or as database administrators or stuff like that, they don't usually know, not all of them, but usually they don't fully understand how the business operates. And because Datavault modeling is especially interested about the business concepts, it's really important to like establish that culture where discussion about data is like a normal day activity instead of being something that is only needed when there's a data warehouse project happening there.
So you've been talking about this sort of central kitchen approach versus this distributed one. So you think that the distributed one is the one to go to?
Yeah, well, of course, as we talk about different ways of organizing in large enterprises, is that of course there should be some kind of ecosystem governance and maybe like principles on how to do modeling and things, and especially within the Datavault perspective, I would say in there the common development principles and making business even more involved in the whole thing is even bigger and more important than even if you had like one central team being there.
Does this, Ari, resonate with the course offering that you have? Do you see more business people joining now than in the past, or how do you see it?
Yes, unfortunately, business people are also now participating in our educations, for instance, and courses, but still more is needed, and also basic knowledge about these technologies. We IT people, our fault is that we like to talk in technical terms, which then business people actually don't understand only half of our sentences, So we must learn to speak in a way that business people understand. So in simple terms, because this is not rocket science actually.
Yeah.
But we don't have to use. That's why I like Petr's presentation. It wasn't too technical, and also this is the problem with Datavault modeling itself, because what I liked in this approach too, and in this model-driven approach, is that Datavault models are actually impossible to read for business people. Actually, they are impossible to read for many IT people too, because you have so many tables and those data models look so messy. It's really hard to get them. And I have been doing as a consultant evaluation projects where I evaluate the Datavault structures, and it takes time to really look into that model because they are so large. That's why this conceptual model is so much economical, so much less things to look at, and it's more in that conceptual and logical way. So that is important too.
So correct.
Yeah, there's a question coming from the audience. I don't know who wants to take it, but the question goes like, can you share insights on pre-built data models for industries or standard data domains? So, okay, Jonni, you were the first.
I can start. So, especially I've been working also within the SAP domain of things where a lot of operational reporting is built on pre-built content, and that comes from the assumption that there can be pre-built business concepts, and they like work for a very generic processes or things like that. But if we think about Datavault things, or what should go into a prepackaged model, is that one of the things that come almost automatically out of the box, that it's tied to the source system. So if there's a prepackaged models for SAP source system, then most likely that prepackaged content is made for SAP. And even though SAP might be the core system that you are using, you shouldn't be modeling your business like SAP sees, because it's a ERP system made for car manufacturing, and you can use it for retailing and a lot of other things. But how do you guys see it? This is just my point of view.
Yes, I agree. I have seen also a lot of these industry models, and although they contain important industry standards, perhaps, but still there's a big temptation to just buy those often very expensive models and then ignore this own data modeling and the own involvement of business. So I think they are actually dangerous. So it's much better to do the data modeling yourself and involve the business. Of course, in some cases perhaps, but in general, I have seen cases where a lot of money spent, and then these models are also very complicated. So it doesn't mean that you don't need to do the data modeling, which some people think it's so hard, or they try to avoid it. So let's buy ready-made data models, but you have to change them anyway. They don't fit you. So you have to be a very good data modeler to understand those complicated large models. So you can't avoid the data modeling part anyway. And they still miss your local requirements you have, or local legislation. You have to add something and strip a lot of things away. So be very careful with those.
So I have two things to add to this. Yes, from technical perspective, you could already prepare an industry model as I have here for airline industry and load it. But I agree, I more take it like as an inspiration. And there are very good books by Lance Silverson that wrote a lot like small patterns. Look, if you do a sales part, consider all these elements, and then you should mentally go through and say, do we have this case? Don't we have it? So you need to do your own data modeling, but it helps you maybe to show what you're missing, because it's not in your point of view right now. So maybe you missed some special thing in your data that you have. Take it as inspiration. I always open his books again and again if I start modeling a new part. But then, as you say, we're talking to the business user and say, but you do this part differently. You don't have this complexity. So don't model this complexity if you don't have it, because it clutters your model. Even theoretically, the concept would be there. You're not using it. We can add it later with Datavault modeling. Don't worry about it now. Make it as simple as possible that people understand the stuff you're doing.
Good. Maybe there's a direct question towards you, Petr, I guess. Ville posted this one about sort of reporting is useless unless the reports are used and validated by the business. But then a direct question about Datavault Builder. So how it lives with ELT and existing models on Snowflake environment. So any practical examples on that?
The first one is easy. Yes, I agree. And we try to reach it by delivering smaller bits that are testable, that the people focus on one small bit we delivered. And the second thing is we have an ELT loader. So that's the first thing. Datavault Builder is mainly ELT tool. Yes, we have ETL capabilities for staging data into Snowflake, but Snowflake users can already use the built-in staging mechanism, which are very great in Snowflake, to get the data on Snowflake, and we can pick it up from there. In that case, I would go to our staging area and don't select the ELT loader, but just a ETL loader, but the ELT loader. I say in which schema, in which table the data is already loaded, and we can drag it from there as well, only the deltas, the change data since the last time, into our process through all the layers, which I showed here in the demonstration. And this works very cool. I really like this part about Snowflake.
Yeah. Thanks, Petr. There's also questions coming from Sami related to automation tools, and do those tools make the sort of logical models more visible for the business users? So any comments on that, Jonni?
Bit of a tough one,
Yeah.
Sami. Of course,
I might have a hunch on the case that you have on mind, and I would say that when talking about conceptual level models and figuring out what is one of the key things is also to identify which is worth of a hub type of a thing. That's first thing that you need to identify the core business concept there, and especially with large enterprise systems, you get a lot of reference data. Also, that might be something that you need to figure out during the starting phase of the project. That do you integrate all of the reference data and all those things as part of your models? But if you think about the attributes and stuff like that, there's always the part that you really need to make sure that your models represent the business that you are in. And I think the more visual the things are there, the better it is, but there's no like magic bullet that can say that if there's the same attribute in different satellite or something like that, that they would tie them together. And that there's a lot of things that relate over to the data steward and data ownership process on how to identify the core things there and how to model them in the Datavault side. And this is a really vague answer, and I'm really sorry for that. But if you, Petr or Ari, have a better answer for this, I would appreciate it.
I would just answer the short part. Core is essentially the same for different use cases. Yes, that's my opinion here. So the core should be the data as it is. And in the presentations layer, we're differentiating the use cases for different point of views, like logistics doesn't have the same point of view like sales. One example I had in the past is an order with the value of €0. It's not a sale for the sales guys, but it's one for the logistics guy because they need to send it out. So, and this is, I think, a big change that we have here in the conceptual modeling. So,
any closing words from Ari? I think we are running out of time right now.
Yes, I'm happy to hear that this your approach is so data model based and not source system based, and happy to see that your solution. I think these kind of tools are really in need, and we have this own tool, Eli, which is data modeling tool, and I think this can be really well integrated here and has the same kind of approach to this data vault implementation. So yes, happy to see that.
Good. So it's all about collaboration and discussions together. We are running out of time. I would like to thank the audience for joining. The actual recording is actually available within a few minutes. I also would like to thank the presenters and the panelists, so Petr and Ari, and obviously Jonni as well. So thank you for joining us, and have a great fall. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.